And the reading will be introduced, I think, by Carly. Is that right? Then we have a letter that Kim is going to read, and maybe Ray will read part of it if he's here later. And then Michelle Martinez will read, Manuh Santos will read, Eloisa Gonzalez will read, hopefully from Seeking Light, but they can read from other things as well if they've written something more recent and they choose to read from that. And then the very last thing we'll do is show the second half of Amy's film, Seeking Light documentary. And if there's time after that, there may be some questions you have after you've seen the very last piece. Okay, is everybody clear on that? You look okay there? All right, first, this is nice. James Joyce did a really nice job on this article in the paper. I don't know if you saw that, but he did a great job of capturing some things, and Jim's got some nice quotes in there. He mentions Eloisa's connection to the Yakima Herald. And that's in the home front. If you go to the front page of today's paper, and actually turn to page 5, there it is. Here's your horoscope for today. Where is it? Oh yeah. This is Gemini. My wife is a Gemini. This is my introduction to Amy Peters. A role reversal may be likely for you. This is her horoscope for today. In instances where you've always served as a student, that's not true. You may now find yourself being the instructor.
Oh.
Here she is. You'll have much to offer, it guarantees, and she does. So here's Amy Peters.
Like mic up here?
No, but do you need a mic?
Do I need it?
If you stand in front of that mic, that probably works.
Will this work?
Yeah.
Put down on the sort of convergence with the prevalence of new media and also the news stories that were being told by the students here that were shaping the Valley in new ways. I was really interested in exploring. So the writing was the vehicle for the students. My camera was sort of the vehicle for me. And I guess I'll introduce to you the first film that I did. I didn't feel like one film was enough because there was so much that I felt like I was missing in doing hours of editing. So I did 2 films. And these are amateur films. I had never used a video camera prior to 2002. And you will see the result of that. These are not perfect films by any means. These are stories that I gathered from the footage that I took. And so in this first film, you'll see readings in the classroom, in Jim Bodine's English classroom. And you'll also see a reading at Elliott Bay Bookstore. The students were invited to read at Elliott Bay Bookstore. There were many, many public readings when Seeking Light first came out, but this was obviously a very important reading for them. It would be an important reading for any of us to be invited there. And so that was an opportunity that I had to go with them as well. So in this video are Uziel Estrada, Noe Valencia, Martha Gamboa, Tatiana Huizar, and Jim Bodine, as well as other students, but those were sort of the focus of this first film.
So why don't we start with saying, I don't know, saying who we are and what do you want to say first? What you remember from the project? Let's start there. Let's start on this end so you can kind of tell people who you are and what part you played in the project.
My name is Rob Proud. I teach photography at Davis High School, and Jim asked me to take photos of students that were in his writing class, but the invitation was a lot bigger. There was involvement that I think I'd have to echo what Amy said, helped me on a journey, helped me understand kids a little bit better. I have kids for such a short amount of time that I don't get to form the kind of relationships that other teachers do. So this was a way for me to get to know kids a little bit better, to get to know Jim a little better. And my contribution was photographing the students and also doing some other photography. Jim did a lot of photography with the families. So what I remembered was that it became a lot bigger than just running over to the library and snapping pictures of the kids. And maybe later we can talk about the process of how we photograph the kids.
Jim Bodine, Rob here on my right. One night at a restaurant, we said, well, how could we lay this book out and have these pages look as beautiful as any page could be? And Rob sketched that basic page design out on a paper tablecloth, and that's all beautiful. And these guys all contributed to that process too, and they're still in my life, and it'll be fun to hear from them tonight.
Manuh?
Oh, my name is Manuh. Well, I was encouraged by Bodine to write stories. I was not interested in writing my story, but somehow I got into his class, and so that's how I wrote my story, some stories. But back then I didn't write a story, so that's it.
And Manuh, I'll ask the students that are here. What year did you graduate from Davis?
2004.
2004.
Yeah.
So you've been out for 3 years. What have you been doing for the last 3 years, or since this class even?
I went to Clark Community College in Vancouver to run.
On the track team?
Yeah, track
Okay.
team. I didn't stay there very long. I think my first year there, I don't want to stay there, so I came back to track.
Good.
And yeah, and I kind of missed running, and then I started running. And that's it.
Good. Eloisa?
My name's Eloisa Gonzalez, otherwise Eloisa Gonzalez in the book. There's a long story behind the change of name. I was, I believe, a senior taking independent English class from Modine after I maxed out on all my English courses. And this is where I think the book really sparked the second book, obviously, this is the second one. But I did some of the editing with him, some of the Spanish stuff, as well as the selection for the letters to Guadalupe and selection of the Machu Picchu ones, as well as the introduction to the Machu Picchu section. So some of you guys might know I'm now a reporter for the Yakima Herald Republic.
And where'd you go after Davis High School?
Unfortunately, I went to Gonzaga University. I did make it through for the 4 years. Studied in Spain a little bit for a while. Got to learn a little more of, how we became Mexican through the process and how the world views us.
Michelle?
Okay, hi, my name is Michelle Martinez. I graduated Davis in 2001, and I came here to Yvcc, and my first year here at Yvcc, Mr. Bodine contacted me and wanted me to be in the book, so I took him up on that opportunity, and I was just excited that he wanted to have my stories in there, and that he actually remembered me, after graduation. I stayed here at Yvcc for about 2.5 years and got my AA degree, and then I transferred to Central, and I got my bachelor's degree in family studies and a minor in early childhood education, and right now I'm working at a daycare. So
In Yakima?
in Yakima.
Which daycare?
Kids Inc.
Oh, yeah, I know about kids.
So they just opened up in August, and I spend most of my time with toddlers, so it's a lot of fun.
Good. And Amy, do you want to say anything?
I already.
Does anybody have any questions before I keep asking?
Can I ask more than one? Manu, I wondered, is it hard to go back to your village now, having been exposed to a new life here?
It will not be easy because I'm already been through that struggle. Even though if I go back, I'll be okay because I can change. I can adopt that living situation right away because I know how to live that life. And if I come back in the United States, I'll do the same thing. Yeah.
Did you run in Mexico?
No, I walk a lot. Yeah, a lot.
What got you to run at Davis?
Well, I wanted to play soccer, and I couldn't make it. I couldn't. I didn't like sports when I was young, so somebody told me like you should run. I said okay. So I think Jose Garcia, yeah, he made me run 4 laps around. I mean, it was hard. Yeah. So I don't know, somehow I started running. Yeah. And now I like to run a lot.
Yes, Diane?
This question is directed to some of the students who have left and come back or who moved on. How can you describe perhaps the sort of different place that you're in now versus, or the process, how you think working on this book, how you carried that to where you are now, and are you in the same place or a different place? And
I feel I'm sort of at a different place than where I was back in high school. Even though this is really sad, I stopped writing, so, you know, it's sad. But I took English classes up there at Central, and I kind of let that experience, you know, turn me off to writing. So, yeah, so I used to write all the time back in high school. And I don't know. So, I don't know, I see it as different right now than back then, so.
Well, Eloisa, talk about your writing, and then I'll ask Manuh to talk about his writing now.
Funny that you ask. I was talking about it to you earlier, and I mentioned to some people that for me it's been a difficult transition from being a writer from this book to being a reporter. It's been a very painful transition. Trying to figure out how to explain this. First of all, my passion for writing, and I love journalism, and I don't think I could have chosen anything else better to do with my life. I feel like this was my calling. Really began with this book. If you read the book, I interviewed my mother my junior year when I was in Boding's classroom. Left a lot of unanswered questions. And from growing up with my family, as being Mexican women, we weren't allowed to speak unless spoken to. So that's when all the writing started coming in. I would love to read and write in silence. I would never tell anybody to, shut myself in the bathroom. Because if my dad would find out that I wasn't working, washing the dishes, cooking, then I'd get a slap in the head. And so to avoid any pain, I would hide. So when I started asking my mom, who came from a very similar background, for this particular story, I think for once in her life she felt like she was human and she was visible. And, sorry, I get really teared up. And so I realized the power of not only telling someone else a story, but asking the question. And so that's when the power of reporting came to me. I went back the second year and I realized that it wasn't me so much asking this time, it was her telling. And so I had unleashed something in her. And Bodine seeing my mother grow, I don't think he realizes how much. She's returning to study English. Just an amazing woman. I call her Nave Caminos now. So And my dad has, through the process, learned to drop those traditions of being a typical machista, and has now flourished along with my mother. And that helped me kind of patch up some problems with my parents. And so sometimes as a reporter you realize you can't give your opinion even though you might have one deep inside. It's best to let the person say it to you. So I've learned to shush myself up and sacrifice my body as a means to voice others' opinions. And so oftentimes it's difficult because to every story there's two sides. And I might not agree, particularly with the beat that I cover immigration and minority affairs. My job is to get everything and trust the readers to develop their own opinions and, you know, to be wise about what they read and what they see. And so I've been called a traitor quite a bit. I've been threatened to get kicked out of the Hispanic community. I've been, pretty much everything I've been through and all my experiences have been retracted from me. And it feels like being blank. So it's hard, but
it's not so much the haven of the world. Now you're out there and you're still writing.
Right, and it's also being Mexican, a Mexican woman in a place right now that is being constantly attacked. I mean, it's hard. I get phone calls. I used to get phone calls about it every week when I started, people asking me if that was documented or not. Whether it's a story about immigration or a story about, you know, farm days in Tampico. Something completely irrelevant to immigration. It hurts to listen to that, but as a reporter, you have to learn to brush it off. You cannot get hung up on these things. No question is a stupid question, no matter how racist it may be. It's the fact that these people do not know anything else, and so they need to ask. And as a reporter, you learn to sacrifice your own integrity, your own pride for the well-being of the community. And that's something I think that goes untold oftentimes. You know, we're looked at from all sides of the world as the bad people. And we're out to get everybody. And so it's hard.
I have something.
Yeah.
When I looked at that book, or read the book, I saw both languages. And one was one and one was the other. And the thing that I think is fascinating with you guys is what happened in the middle. What happened between those two languages? And I'd love to see that.
Can I
read
just
that?
interrupt just for a second? Because with Manuh, we have to add more than 2 languages.
Okay.
And when Manuh arrived here, Davis High School was his first school ever. And he spoke no English and no Spanish.
Okay.
So he
But
addressed language questions to Manuh.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. It's that middle ground. That's what I liked. You guys.
I think oftentimes we actually are forced to live that middle ground. We have roots in both sides, and so we can't pick or choose. We are both sides, and so is our language.
I was to say, is that an uncomfortable place to be?
It was uncomfortable for me before I met Bodhi. Hence the silence half the time. I came into his class very quietly, but when you realize that that's who you are and you learn to accept yourself, that's not going to change, and that you need to embrace it, because that is a quality. It becomes more of a comfort because you know that's you.
So he gave you a new language, the language of connection.
Manuh, you want to talk about, first about do you continue to write now, and then maybe about learning languages? Do you still write?
I don't write much, but I like to speak, just to speak about what's right. And I always like to speak about my native people, not only my native people, but the whole America, you know. In Mexico, there are mestizo and criollo, they have, and then there are me, native and then black. I don't think there are very few black in Mexico. So we are the worst. I mean, people for many Mexicans. Because if you are Indian in Mexico, they treat you like an animal. You know, I remember when I was little, we live in the mountain. This guy come and they say, "Do you want to work?" And yes, we want to work because we want to earn some money. And so they tell us like, "You come with us to work in this place. We're gonna pay you really good." And but they lie to us. Once they take us to work someplace, and they put us to work in a campo, in a little camp, and we have to stay there until the tomato season is done, or like we usually eat vegetables. And so that was not fun. I remember one night we escaped, like about 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to live here. My mom told me. So we left that night because the living condition it was bad. You know, you are working in the field, the airplane to fumigate the field, and when those liquids fall in your skin, they burn. And you know the tomato, how do you say it now? Where they put the water to irrigate. Yeah, irrigate. Yeah, those waters like when you walk inside again. And by the end of the day, when you're done working, your skin starts to break apart. So I have to put some lotion, you know, to prevent it from getting infection. And that's not fun. And, so sometimes, like, we were like, don't speak in native, you know, and so. In order to survive in Mexico, we didn't say anything. We just we stay quiet. That was the only way to survive. If you stand up and speak about yourself, they'll kill you or do some bad thing. So we learn to survive by just be quiet. That's the only way to survive. And so coming here is that's why we don't like to tell story, because that gets you into trouble. I'm serious. And so I don't, in my family, we don't write. We don't write. That's why writing, for me, writing right now is a new experience. It's sometimes I feel uncomfortable writing stories, but now I'm starting to understand. And I want to understand because I choose to. You know, that's the idea. But I just like to speak. I would like to speak and write, something like that.
I think there may be time for one more question before we start moving things around. Peggy?
I was wondering, Eloisa, if...
Sorry, I got a muffle.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You got a cramp on it?
Yeah.
You didn't run here, did you?
No.
Okay.
I know you used to run without shoes. I mean,
That hurts.
stand on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay like that. So, I'm sorry, guys.
Did the paper assign you immigration and affairs? And if is that something that you think, because of your Mexican heritage, gives you an advantage to cover or a disadvantage? I mean, I know it's difficult,
Right.
but
I think most topics are difficult for reporters, period, because we are human. That, I do keep that in mind. The paper did not initially assign me that. Technically, I cover general assignments, so anything that comes my way. However, I am the only Spanish-speaking reporter in the room. And so we can be covering immigration strictly from the non-Spanish-speaking community, which obviously you're removing a certain group of people, or you can send me out and get all ranges of perspectives. And the reason I started covering, or reporting, I guess, was I saw the need in Yakima with the population being so Hispanic and very little representation within the newsroom. So this has been my passion. This is what I wanted to work up to. I got lucky and I ended up going into it right out of college. Because after I finished my internship at the Yakima Herald as a cops and courts reporter, so I dealt with the crime, they rehired me for a 6-month period to kind of check me out, see how I would do covering Hispanic issues, because I belong to that community, so I'm not an outsider. I don't need to bridge it because I'm already there. And you're bringing a perspective that someone else might not understand. Things that make sense to me perhaps may not make sense to my editor. That makes sense to the community because I grew up in that. So it's definitely a strength. It's being able to connect with people. I know where people are at. I know where to find them if I need to have questions answered. It's unfortunate that we're such a distinct community from the English-speaking community to the Hispanic community, period. All I'm trying to do, and because I have my feet in both, one on one side and the other, I can bridge it with my writing. And so it makes it easier.
Okay, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. That was great. And if I could get my students, don't know, it's Seeking Light in Each Dark Room, Buscando Luz en Cada Cuarto Oscuro. And it is the product of Yakima, Washington. And I'm going to stop talking about the book and let a student come introduce it, and then we'll have a letter from former students. Here's Carly and Stas.
Thank you all for coming. It's a rare thing to have a book written by your community, your classmates, your people. But when we do, as in the case of Seeking Light in Each Dark Room, edited and believed in by Jim Bodine, given the gift of photo and the possibility for reflection by Rob Prout, and most importantly, with contributions from Jim Bodine's Latino literature class students, it becomes a source of pride. It becomes a mechanism for change, for connection, and hopefully a source of light along paths once condemned. Paths that have too long been in the dark. Tonight, the Abre Caminos, the Waymakers, will guide us down some of those paths. May we see mothers, the beginning, the comienzos of all things, of ourselves and truths at the end.
Now, Kim Miller will read a letter, and I want to introduce who the letter is from first. The letter is written by 2 former students from Latino literature at Davis High School. Let's see if I can find them here. And the students are Antonia and Maria Caro, who came to Yvcc for 2 years, then after they graduated from Davis High School, then went to Central and are currently students at Central. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jim can correct me maybe, I think Antonia and Maria, like Manuh, came to this country without their parents, came as teenagers to the United States, and are Abre Caminos in the very purest sense of the word, breaking new ground for their entire family. And their stories...
Yeah, they came to go to school.
They came here to go to the schools in the United States.
They came to get an education.
And after they got their education at Davis, they continued at YVC at Central. And thank you for reminding me, Jim. The reason they're not here tonight in person. Here's their photo with their parents' photo. They couldn't have their photo taken with their parents because their parents were still in Mexico. The reason they're not here with us tonight is they are studying in Chile. They're there for a quarter through Central Washington University in Chile, and they have been recently to Argentina. And they told me that they have you'll read some of it, they have some side trips planned, but for those of you who know the book, Pablo Neruda, the Chilean poet, wrote the Machu Picchu poem that much of the book is based on. That's his home place. So here's a little bit from the Caro sisters, from Kim Miller with an assist from Dan Peters with some really bad Spanish. Actually, I'm going to cheat a little bit. Antonio, come on up here. Come on up here. I want to introduce Antonio too. Come up here, Antonio. He doesn't know what he's doing right now. Kim does, though. Here's Kim. Okay, you're up.
Can you help me?
No, Antonio is. Antonio, come over here. We got English and Spanish. We're going to go between right now.
10th de Mayo de 2007. Estima, Professor Bodin, and Audiencia. It is an honor to have been chosen to read this letter and our poems in class. We really appreciate this opportunity and hope that you enjoy learning about Latinos' experiences and lives. Saludos, right here. I apologize.
Saludos desde Bolivia, Chile. Bolivia, Chile.
We remember remember as if it was yesterday, and that we were in Latino literature classes. Not only because we really enjoyed being there, but also because we learned about the power that a poem might have in someone else's life. Being in Norando's homeland helps us to understand his writings and poems. We are planning a trip to Isla Negra, one of Norando's homes. This place was where he was inspired to write many of his poems, just by looking at the sea and its immensity. In the month and a half that we have been in Chile, we have learned a lot about Chilean culture, literature, and most importantly, their history. This has helped us to understand Latinos' differences and similarities. Now we know that not all Latinos think and act or live the same way, and especially women. I see the Latinos' power on the streets and in education. One would think that Chile is a country where women have more power than other countries because they have a female president. But that is not the reality. From my point of view, many women are struggling because of the machismo and men dominance. Women are very reserved and quiet. People do not talk to foreigners, and it's really hard to make friends with them. They are very reserved and most of the time do not interact with others. At the end of April, we have had the opportunity to go on a week-long trip to Bariloche, Argentina. It was amazing to see how Argentinians are more open to people and how friendly they were in general. I could observe that Argentinian women have more confidence in themselves than Chilean women. As Latinas, we consider ourselves very strong women who are striving for a bright and better future, not only for ourselves, but for other women.
Now, I picked Antonio Padilla. He's not in this class, and he's in my English 101 class, but Antonio Padilla is from La Cuestita.
Yeah.
This is a Padilla from that Jim and Rob Prout went and met the family and have exchanged gifts and done some writing. So this is Antonio reading for Antonia. Okay, here's Antonio.
We want to make a difference in our future students' lives. We want to make a way where there is no way. This is one of the reasons that we are in South America. We want to explore other lands and learn from people who have different ideas. I have noticed that we are not the same since we got here. This experience has had a big impact in our lives, and we will never be the same. Now, I see the world with different eyes, the eyes of our roots, nuestros antepasados, los incas, los mayas, los mapuches y Yvcc, porque nunca seremos los mismos y su sangre corre por nuestras venas. A world that screams and wants to express its greatness, el cual fue opacado y nunca volverá a ser lo que fue. Gracias por su atención. Espero que puedan ver así como nosotras con nuevos ojos una perspectiva del mundo diferente. Disfruten de los poemas. Antonia y María Caro.
And they sent pictures with it too, but for some reason all that came through in the picture was the top inch of the picture, And it looks like the weather's beautiful where they are. I can't see anything else in the picture. So on the blog, there's a website associated with this class, writersandideas.blogspot.com. If you want to go back and look up the Caros, we'll hopefully get those pictures back from them soon, and we'll get to know a little bit more about how their trip is going. But it's a remarkable, here we are 5 years after the book has come out, and there are two of these Abre Caminos that are down in Argentina or down in Chile, going to Isla Negra, the home of Neruda, hopefully to pin some notes along his fence. Our next reader this evening is Michelle Martinez. She'll be followed by Manuh Santos. Michelle Martinez graduated from Davis High School and took the Latino literature class with Jim Bodine in what year, Michelle?
My senior.
Your senior. What year did you graduate?
2001.
2001. And it's a year-long class that they were involved in, and they studied Machu Picchu, Pablo Neruda, along with images of women that were not the traditional images from the history of Latin America, and wrote letters to those people. And in 2001, Michelle graduated from high school and came to Yvcc, where I had the good fortune of being her creative writing teacher. And having had a student that's been in this class, especially with Michelle's abilities, my creative writing student was that was a rare treat, and she's an incredible writer. I learned independently of this book in my class. She graduated from Yvcc with an AA and continued on to Central Washington University, where she earned a family sciences degree as well as a minor in early childhood education, and works at Kids Incorporated here in Yakima, Washington. Here's Michelle Martinez.
Thank you. I'm first going to start off with the short story, The Way Where the Path Lay. And this story is about my father working out in the fields. And I went with him a couple of times to earn extra money. And I couldn't believe how fast that he picked the fruit and how somehow the sun seemed to control him. The way where the path lay. And I watched the sun beat on his body, as it always did. It was a ritual from sunrise to sunset. He tried to beat the sun, but somehow it always came out on top. He climbed those stairs that almost reached to heaven as he picked the forbidden fruit. He grabbed, twist, and bend. Then he dropped it over and over again, but it never did fill up his bag of what he considered those helpless dreams. The earth was his mother and the sun was his father. His mother gave him the dirt from which he came, but his father, the sun, was the one that made him grow. He sees me staring at him. I am at the foot of the tree. I look up at him with my sinful eyes. I open my mouth and my words flew out. Are you ever going to beat your father, the sun? He looked down at me. His mouth looked like it had been tied with rope chains. He started to chew. My time will come when I will rise above the sun. Then my words will no longer be contained. I will be able to rise above the sun and rule it, he said. That will be good. Then the sun will no longer beat you down, I said. It would be good. But answer me a question. Where did he come from? He asked with dim eyes. I really don't know where I came from. I guess the wind blew me here, or I got lost, and I really don't remember where I came from. It's been a long time, but the only thing I do remember is the smell from these fruits. Wherever I go, the scent chases me. On those lonely nights, it actually haunts me, I said with sad eyes. So we stared at each other. It was like looking into a lake that showed you what you missed. We both watched as our souls interlocked. Then we both beat each other. He showed me what I missed, and he showed me what I needed. I finally saw that he was my son, my father. I've been so blind in the dark that I didn't know where I was. I showed him how to set himself free from the sun, because the sun wasn't his father. It was just himself holding back. So then, to get back to where we belong, we both tore a sleeve from our souls, exchanged the sleeves, and sewed them back up with our tears. Now entering Terrace Heights, birth ritual, Inside Out, She Wept, and All That She Knew are short stories that have two parts to them. The first part is just kind of like what I see, and then the second short part is just a connection to the first part. So now entering Terrace Heights. He's driving his red Beretta car now entering Terrace Heights. He keeps on going straight until he turns to the left. We're going to visit an old friend. Okay. He drives along the paved streets, never beginning, never ending. He stops. He opens the door. They both get out. He walks straight to her, then he looks down on her and her husband. She was like a mother to me. 2 years ago, I gave her Mother Day's flowers. I told her, even though you aren't my mother, I consider you that. She is lost for words, and the only comfort she can give him is a pat on the back. They only died a couple of months in between. She went first, he went next. Let's leave. They both get in his red Beretta car. They leave the paved streets, never beginning, never ending. They go back out to the road that heads home for the both of them. Look, there's a quail. Where? There. Oh, I missed it. I'm always looking out for things like that. She knew exactly where she had to go. All she had to do was follow this paved street where it led exactly to the local supermarket. But she wanted to take the shortcut, so she did. But the shortcut wasn't what she thought, and instead of finding the supermarket, she got lost. She never did find her way off the shortcut. Birth ritual. He always had a ritual to his walk. He always walked up with his head too, but the problem was that is he never seen what he was stepping into. I heard he's like that because he wants to be the same as everyone else. And every night he cries because he is so confused. He doesn't know whether to throw his mask away or surrender to it. Too bad, he was a nice guy. He could have changed things, but I will never understand why he changed himself. He prayed to whatever was supposed to be up there, and he cried out, asking, was he doing things right? And that's what she waited for every Sunday. She loved it when her grandma made fresh, hot tortillas. Every Sunday resulted in a pile of tortillas that she imagined could touch the sky. Inside Out. It took her 36 years to see the world was open to her. She had been so contained and limited in what she wanted to do. It haunted her even though she had this freedom. Yeah, they called me to go back to school and get my GED at Yvcc. Hey, that's great, you should go and get it. What for? I don't even know what I want to do. Who cares? You can still go there along the way, and then along the way you can figure out what you want to do. She was afraid. She dropped out of school when she was in 8th grade. From then on, the world changed on the outside while she stayed inside. It was her time to shine. She was proud. Of all that she went through, she finally made it. She will be the first in her family to graduate. She wept. She wept to her mother, but she didn't want to listen. She wept to her father, but he did the things the same as her mother. She wept to God, but she got a feeling that he had more important things to worry about than her. Why won't anyone listen to me? It feels like I'm put on this earth to be by myself forever. The clock is ticking. She can't stop. She grows more and more concerned that no one is listening to her. She fights for a way to let herself out. She can't stand it anymore. She wants to be heard. I feel very sorry for their loss. I know how much they love their daughter. It must be hard for them. She was their only daughter. It's all their fault. They should have seen it coming and put a stop to it. If it was my daughter, I would have known if she had thoughts about killing herself. And her mom wept, but no one wanted to hear it. Her father wept, but no one heard it. God wept, but he had no one to weep to. She loved him. She loved him even more than life herself. He was always there to listen to her. She was grateful to God every day for sending him to her. She was happy. All that she knew. 4 years have passed by. She tries to remember out of the 4 years which memory was the best. But all the memories get caught up in time, in a place that was non-existent. All that she had left are the lessons she learned and the feelings attached to them. Out of my high school experience, I've grown so much as an individual. I lost my friends, but then I gained new ones. Sometimes during school it was hard because I didn't have any idea who I was or what I wanted to be. It hurt to see some of my friends who changed not for the better, but for the worse. And for a little while, I was spinning the wrong way myself. I still don't know where I'm headed, but I'm ready for anything that comes my way. She was right. She was ready for anything. The memories she had from school sadly fade away, but the lessons learned stay as footprints forever imprinted in her heart. She turned 8-year-old today. She had a long sundress on. She was glad it was her birthday. She was so happy she ran outside in her backyard. She put her arms out as far as they could go. She started to spin, slowly at first, but she continued to spin. She started to go faster and faster until she couldn't remember. Dear Michelle, Pretending Games, this is a letter poem to myself and why I need to have a voice. Dear Michelle, Pretending Games, you wear a cross that's turned the wrong way out. You wear your heart on a necklace. Do you think that they will leave you? So many times you played the image of mother. You protect your family first instead of yourself. You are an expert in role-playing, of keeping the peace. You are so consumed, you don't know what you are here to hear.
See an enlargement of each one of those?
An original story, although I haven't talked about it with her. You're going to read something different, Eloisa? Here's Eloisa Gonzalez. I forgot to mention a couple of things while she's coming up here. Read whatever you want.
Okay.
Second of all, Eloisa, after she graduated, went to Gonzaga University for 4 years and now has returned. You notice a theme, coming back to Yakima, all three of them, to contribute to her society here, to her culture here, as a reporter at the Yakima Herald Republic. And I ran into Eloisa. This did happen. This wasn't a dream. On the streets of Spokane one time, didn't I? Eloisa Gonzalez?
I heard you read your poetry.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, here's Eloisa. Here she is. Thanks.
First of all, I want to apologize. I'm quite nervous, and obviously some of you guys saw me get very emotional earlier. It's like meeting an old friend, something that I haven't approached since I last left the book. So I'm nervous to let this out myself, so bear with me. I am going to read you an original story, but I might go with part 2 just because I felt that's when I got to the nitty-gritty with my mother. But I'm going to first start and read The Path to Machu Picchu introduction essay that I helped with. First of all, I want you guys to know that this wasn't just an explanation of what poetry is. It wasn't an introduction of poetry for me. It was more than that. It was an introduction to who I was as a person. It was a revelation of my past, of my raíces, my roots of who I am now. And so it's given me the chance to really shed my mask and figure out who is really down there raw. So I'm going to read a section to you that kind of sets up for the rest of it. Step by step, I continued going up the path to Machu Picchu. I was eager to find myself. As I looked back, my anger converted into energy. No longer did it hold me back. It pushed me forward. I carried ambition, spirituality, and love. Those were the things I needed to survive. There were no tools. There were the tools I used to resurrect my voice from its death. I had maintained its silence for many years. No longer would it be contained. My voice would finally breathe its words. In my journey, each word I wrote and spoke was a rugged rock I climbed. Stories of my life were inscribed in each rock. Each story had penetrated into my mind, keeping the past alive. Understanding the past helped me understand my journey, as well as my reasons for existence. I know that I needed to finish the journey in order to begin. I watched the others struggle with each step, but I could see that their ambition on their faces. They were eager to make it too. The only tools of defense and protection were the voices, the pens, and the past. That's what kept us going. As we moved towards the top, we were anxious to arrive, even though we knew we never would arrive. It was a journey without an end. It was only the beginning. So that's how I started off. The podium that we had earlier spoke about, how it was a sacred ground, was a connection, a thread between all of us. We all came from different angles of the world. My parents migrated to the U.S., so I was U.S. born, but I was raised very traditionally. Very little American culture was allowed to seep into our doors because it was so foreign for my parents that they felt uncomfortable and humiliated in the outside world, so why would they want it to feel in their home? So we weren't allowed to pursue that. And obviously, as being bicultural, it complicates things when your parents aren't wanting to accept it. But then I started to realize who I was. I had quieted it so often. It wasn't really a form of embarrassment, but of a lack of understanding. My parents and I never really had a close connection until I hit Bodine's class, when curiosity started to come out and I started asking the questions. That's when I really figured out who I was. I was a Mexican woman living in the U.S. And I'm sure a lot of my classmates felt the same way. The males were Mexican males. But it was nonetheless similar experiences, a form of revelation, something we did not know existed within us. And this is what kind of led me to write this poem. I'm going to read a section of it because it's too long. But deep in the river, my life stood before me. I could see my life rushing underneath me, dream with the small waves of the river. Now every time I look at your blue eyes, I see my life deep inside. Your eyes draw me and stun me numb. The glow makes me weak, makes me think of the love that exists. And the river that I experienced was crossing into the Columbia River. I made that path many times. When I moved to Yakima from Southern California, I rode the bus with a lot of the migrant workers. And when I would drive down to go see my family, same thing, I rode the bus with the migrant workers. So I was on their journey here and on their journey back. One of the very few women on that bus. But I realized that by looking at the Columbia River when we went over it, I felt this connection to my mother, the very same fear that reaped in her when she first crossed into America. Not knowing how to swim, not knowing what was to come about. So being able to see that river was being able to sing to my mother, ergo being able to sing to myself. And this is where the original story comes in. I'm going to read a quick section from the beginning of the first one, just so you know. I think the writing changes within that year. I wrote this when I was a junior. My mother's name is Eloisa Gonzalez. She was born August 4th, 1957 in a very small town called San Isidro, which is located in Jalisco, Mexico. She was born to a very poor, loving family with very strict guidelines. At the age of 4, my mother lived an extremely poor life. She and her family would go days without eating. They also barely had clothes. My mother's clothes were sometimes made out of bostales, or sacks, that her mother had sewn together. As a child, my mother would play with dolls made of rags. The doll's hair was made of corn husks, and her other toys were made out of barro, which is a form of mud, a dried mud. And at the age of 7, my mother was able to go to school along with her 6 siblings. During the time, I got a note to you, there's 24 of them total. So she was one of 24 kids. During those years, it was harsh time for my mother. The rich kids would humiliate her and her siblings because of their economic situation. My mother kept her head up and continued to go to school as long as she could, which is up to the 4th grade. She would reuse paper as often as she could. She would also use small pieces of paper to write, pencils to write, and would sharpen them with razor blades. This had just opened a path between my mom and I, a journey that we would be sharing for some time. And it also allowed me to get to know who had been raising me and why I was the way I was. So a year later, I rejoined Bodine's class, and I conducted a second interview. And I feel like this is where this real story comes in, not just because of my mother, but because she brings my father into it. And I'm going to go ahead and read a section. In November 1973, an 8.5 month pregnant 16-year-old woman and her 22-year-old husband set out to the United States, the land of dreams. The pregnant woman and her husband were my mother, Eloisa Gonzalez, and my father, Lorenzo Gonzalez Perez. My mother and father were leaving the homeland in search for a better life, for their soon-to-arrive baby. They had hopes and dreams in their eyes. They believed that over the miles of land and past that river, a miracle life would be born. The journey first started when mis padres left their small, humble town of Yvcc, located in Jalisco, Mexico. They were heading to Tijuana on a camion. It was a rough time for my mother and father. The ride was too bumpy for my pregnant mother. There was no food. They had no money for food or clothing, and all the money they had been used to pay for transportation. Fear raced through their heads. What happened if they were to be caught? What would become of their soon-to-arrive child? The hope of arriving in the United States is what kept them on that camion. A hope for a wonderful life for their child is what kept them sane. La tristeza de la separación de la familia les empezó a hervir. the sadness within them from the separation of the family is what really boiled in them at that point. And alone. And then I'm going to jump the story. In the hospital, my mother was afraid Lemire would take them and their baby. They were afraid of the future. Reality had come into play. In Torrance, my father was working as a gardener, trying to provide a decent living for his family. The income was too low, so my parents were forced to leave Torrance and move to Stockton, California. My father left 2 weeks early to find a job for both of them. Later, my mother followed. In Stockton, they worked in the cherry fields and earned low wages. Their income would only provide for food, but no money for shelter. So my father built a house out of a cardboard box and placed it in an area in the field. There, my mother, father, and my 5-month baby sister would sleep. So jumping into it, 9 months later, after residing in Linden, they finally moved to a different area. My mother became pregnant again. The neighbors warned my mother about the health services. They filled my mother with hollow lies. They told her she would not receive medical attention for her pregnancy because of her illegal status. So my mother fled to Mexico, while my father stayed for 4 months before he returned to Mexico. In Mexico, mi madre saved the money my father had sent her during his 4-month period in Linden. They had money to invite their second child, Maria Isabel, into a comfortable world. Isabel would be set up upon a world of dreams and pain. My parents were revealed to such a world, past the miles of land and over the river. So,
You want to read something else?
I can explain a little bit about what happened afterwards, something I was not ready for. My father and I had a difficult relationship growing up. As I mentioned earlier, I wasn't allowed to speak unless spoken to, really hindered our relationship. And when he saw that I was interviewing my mother and my mom had flourished and started to open up and all the pain that was within her for decades started to feed out, he started opening up. And it was difficult because he didn't know how to approach me and I didn't know how to approach him. So you have two very socially inept people trying to meet in the middle. And so he ended up writing things on napkins. So he jotted down, and I have to mention my father never went to school. So he had a hard time writing Spanish. My mother had taught him through the marriage very little that she knew. And so he would sit in front of me and read me what was on those napkins out of embarrassment that I would criticize his Spanish. And that's when I learned that why my father was the way he was and why he never went to school. The whole time I thought he just did not value education and was preaching that to me, that education was pointless and that if I wanted to be a hardworking person, I needed to get in there with my hands and do all the hard labor. My father had been sold into slavery when he was 5 years old to work on people's farms, never giving him the chance to go to school and never giving him a chance to meet his parents. His father was very traditional, would abuse them. I mean, a very nasty form of slavery, would beat him with whips. He ended up migrating to the U.S. For the plight and would work up here for months and then go to Mexico for a week to drop off some money for my grandma and impregnate her again. So he kept doing that for years. And my dad only got to see him for 1 day. And that was to get a beating and send him off to a different farm. And so that's when I found out that my father wasn't because he didn't want to be a good father, but because he didn't know how. And we've been working on our relationship ever since, and so.
So our last item this evening is this film, and I'm going to ask my wife to come back up wherever she is. This is Amy Peters, and she'll describe a little bit about the film, maybe what we're going to see. Okay, here's Amy. I was trying to think of something funny to say. I can't think of anything. Here's Amy.
Had prepared some notes about writing his transformation, and after hearing Eloisa talk, it seems absolutely ridiculous to say anything. Obviously, she and Manuh and Michelle are the embodiment of transformation, and the effect that her writing, the writing that she started in Jim Bodine's class as a high school student at Davis, how that has transformed her own family, how we get to take pride in having her be a presence in Yakima and as a reporter. Obviously, a pretty amazing example of transformation. So, you know, what do I know? In 2002, I talked about this a little bit during the lecture portion of this evening, but in 2002 I was a graduate student at the University of Washington pursuing a Master of Communication in Digital Media, and one of the courses that I was involved in during the fall was a digital documentary film course. And I needed a subject for my project, and at that time the Seeking Light book was released through Blue Begonia Press, and I became introduced to Jim Bodine, got to know Jim Bodine a little bit more, and was introduced to the students of the Latino literature class at Davis High School, who call themselves the Abre Caminos. Abre means to open, and Caminos means the way or the path. And as Jim says, one person who opens one path opens many paths. So those students and Jim invited me into their class, and I brought my digital video camera, which I had never used at all before, and within a few minutes realized the incredible importance of what these students were doing, and realized how sacred and how transformational the work was that these students were taking part of. So it was an honor to be involved, and it still is an honor to be able to be a part of what's happening here tonight. I think that's all I need to say.
Who's in the film that we're going to see?
Who is in the film? Well, Eloisa Gonzalez is in the film, and Michelle Martinez is in the film, and Michelle's sister Sarah Martinez. Oscar Gonzalez, who at that time was a freshman at the University of Washington. I don't know, does anyone know Oscar or know what he's doing?
He's in San Diego getting his master's in studies, I believe.
Oh.
I just talked to him a couple weeks ago.
Awesome. That's great. And of course, Jim Bodine is a part of this film as well. As I mentioned to the lecture portion, this is an amateur attempt to capture what happened with the Abre Caminos. It is not a polished version of a feature-length film or anything, but it was an honor to be a part of the students' lives for a short time and to hear their stories and to also be changed myself by those stories. So here's the second film of the night.
Thank you again very much for coming. Our next reading is in 2 weeks and a day. And if I could have the readers come up and sit up here, we could have people sign some books for our students and for the people that are here. Thank you very much for coming again. Actually, I need the readers up here right now. We have a quick gift for you. There you go. There you go, Manuh. There, Eloisa. These are from the students of the Writers and Ideas class, and can't get enough chocolate, right? Some chocolate right here. And there's an extra one here, and I'll be sure that gets to the right place. So let's give them another round of applause for and thank you very much for coming. Thank you.